So I started building chairs. I guess I built my first chairs in the early 90s, all mission style chairs, nothing real fancy. But then I started building Windsor chairs when I moved back east in the early 2000s. And I took a few classes with Mike Dunbar, and people liked the chairs. I started selling them, and been selling them as a side gig for years. And then like I said, I've been a full-time chair maker now for about 6 years. But I do build a series of ladder backs and Windsor chairs. So I probably make 15 to 20 different styles of either Windsors or ladder backs going on. And one of the things I learned early on was that I hate having to replace a chair because it's broken. And I had a bunch of my Windsors break, and I couldn't figure out why. And it kind of led to to what I call the 5 pillars of a good, strong chair joint, which is what I thought we'd talk about today. And so if you have any questions coming in, then just I say get them over to Brian, and we'll answer them as we go on the spot. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. I do chair making classes. I generally run about 8 of them a year. Sometimes here in my shop in Connecticut, other times in other places around the country. But I think if I can get anybody in the class to learn these 5, what I call the 5 pillars of a strong joint, then I think that the class has probably been a pretty good success. So with that, we can start talking about it. The chair here is that I have here is a loose interpretation of a Brian Boggs style chair. So it's kind of based a little bit on some of the stuff that he does. It's got the rear leg has got a big sweeping bend. So this is steam bent wood that's there. Some of the dimensions are similar, but a lot of the other stuff I've altered slightly to get what I wanted to get. But as we talk about the chair making, the first thing that you saw in this piece is that this is pretty thick and it's bent. And the only way you're going to bend it is if you have really straight grain. So I've got continuous grain that runs from the foot, and you can follow that growth ring all the way up to the top. Right. And it's really key to be able to bend wood is that you have perfectly straight grain. If you have run out, then that's probably where the chair is going to break. So the number one pillar that I have in all my chair making is that I want really, really straight grain. So I have perfectly straight grain in each of my rungs, and I've got perfectly straight grain in my legs, and I've got perfectly straight grain in my slats. Right, so that's the first thing. So especially if you're bending or working the wood or putting any kind of pressure on it, there's any of that cross grain that you're going to get is, that's where the tendency is for it to break. So I can give you an example. Hopefully we can pick this up on a camera. But if I've got good straight grain here, if I wanted to make this a rung, but you can see how the run out goes in here. So if I were to turn this and have a tenon on here, this would be an incredibly weak place for the joint and probably will break. Even though this is white oak and it's a pretty strong, and you can see the backside too, is that it's got a lot of this curvy grain. So I would just toss this into the fireplace and not use it for a chair. It can go somewhere else, but it's not going into a chair. Right. The second thing that I look for is moisture content. So I'm building chairs out of not really green wood, but air dried wood. And I want them to be, in that 12 to 18% range when I'm working them. So one is it gives me gives me the ability to bend a whole lot easier than if it's kiln dried. You can still bend kiln dried ash, but it's in the steamer for 3 to 4 hours, and it's a whole lot of muscle. And I'm getting too old for that. Right. So I'll buy I'll buy slabs or whole logs and mill it out so I have perfectly straight grain, and I want that moisture content to be under 20% if I can get it. Now I'll still bend and work wood if it's over 20%, but now you've got to allow for shrinkage, right? So the first thing that I like talking about is and we have to thank Jeff Lefkowitz. I don't know if anybody knows Jeff. He's an chair instructor down out of Virginia. He does all the drawings for Curtis Buchanan's chairs. He's a graphic designer by trade, so these are his drawings. I don't do them. But when we look at wood movement and we take our boards out of a log, we have what's called tangential plane, where I have the growth rings and I'm running a tangent to the growth rings. And we have the radial plane, which is quarter sawn. So it's running radially from the center of the log to outside the log. So when I look at the log, top to bottom, there's literally no wood movement. That's how you can build a house out of wooden sticks, and it's not going to shrink in various rates, right? Top to bottom. But on your tangential plane, there's a huge amount of wood movement this way. On the radial plane, there's very little wood movement this way, but there's some wood movement this way. So if you have thin pieces that are radial sawn, then you're getting very little wood movement out of them. So if I were to look at a cylinder of green turned wood, it's perfectly round coming off the lathe. But if I let that dry, I'm going to get shrinkage in this tangential plane, but I'm going to have very little shrinkage in this radial plane, right? And that's the key to kind of understanding how these joints go together, just knowing that the wood is going to shrink. And even if you have kiln dried wood, it's still going to shrink some more probably, right? It's usually being forced. It's left outside. If you're buying lumber in the summertime, and you build something, you bring it in your house in the winter, guaranteed it's going to shrink some more, right? And it's going to continue to change. So understanding how that works in your grain direction will make the difference in being able to keep things, being able to keep things together long term. Right? Make sense so far? Right. So understanding that moisture content and that wood movement is the second piece. So if we were to put that into practice now, right? My ideal grain orientation is I'm going to have a rung of a chair come into that radial plane. Because if I have a tenon in here, there's very little wood movement here. There's a lot of wood movement here. So as this shrinks this way, I know it's going to shrink. It'll shrink around the tenon. But it's not going to shrink this way and actually push the tenon out. So if that makes sense. So you're kind of duplicating things. Now the trouble is one-legged chairs don't work real well, right? So you're going to have two opposing pieces come into your chair. So what you do is you compromise it, and you're coming in at a 45-degree angle to that radial and tangential plane, right? And it's kind of a compromise move, but it enables this rung coming in from the chair to this rung coming in and having it as stable as it's going to be, right? And the same thing goes when I have the slats of a chair coming in. There's no wood movement this way, and because of the radial grain, there's very little wood movement this way. The wood movement is this way, but these are so thin it's really negligible. So your joint can stay really tight. And if this the width of this shrinks at all, it'll shrink down and tighten this up, right? So it enables that joint construction, enables you to be able to get and keep strong joints. Right. So if we this may be hard to see, but if we come into here on the leg, so we have the leg coming in, this is the tangential plane, right? It's on the top. This is the radial plane. So I'm always positioning every rung of the chair so that the growth rings are perpendicular to the long wood grain fibers of the leg, everywhere in the chair. So you can see from the growth rings here that this is a very straight grain piece of wood. And then I'm aligning it so that my tangential plane is perpendicular. So if I were to switch this around and move it the other way, right, this is going to shrink some more. This may shrink, but it may not shrink enough, and it's a good way to get a loose joint. So those are so you'll see on all of these rungs, everyone is positioned so the growth rings are perpendicular to the long wood grain of the leg, and on every rung going all the way around. Right. And your slats they're quarter sawn. So this is the radial plane going in. There's very, very little wood movement this way and no wood movement this way. And you will get some shrinkage this way, and it'll shrink a little bit here as well. So what you have is with really, really tight joints coming through. Does that make sense so far? So we do I brought up kind of a half-finished Windsor so we can see it. So I've got so Windsors are made of different kinds of wood, so it's hard to see when they're all finished and painted. But we have a white pine seat, and the grain runs across the seat. So this is a sack back kind of seat. I have the legs, which are hard maple, and you can see I've got perfectly straight grain up and down. And my growth rings are perpendicular to the long wood grain of the fiber coming into the joint for the leg. On the side stretcher, again, I've got perfectly straight grain, and my growth rings are perpendicular to the long wood fibers of the leg. Right? And my center stretcher has perfectly straight grain, and the tangential plane, the growth rings are perpendicular to the long wood grain fibers of this. So the whole chair follows that whole doctrine of following the grain to allow for moisture content. Right, so we've got perfectly straight grain, we're paying attention to moisture content, and we're paying attention to grain orientation. Now, the thing that I don't talk about, that we haven't talked about yet, is in the moisture content, is I super dry all the tenons. So we have a kiln over here. Of course, there's no light on it, but I super dry the tenons so that I can stick just the tenon into the right. So this is an arm with a turned tenon. This tenon is super dry, so it's probably as close to zero as you can probably get. It's going to be final shape to dimension, but it's going to go into an air dried leg. So I'm saying the leg now is what, 12, maybe 15%. This is 0. When this goes in, it's going to swell. And then this is going to shrink, right? So it'll probably get down to maybe 6 or 8% ambient temperature for most, right, which is most households. And this will be at 0. We'll come up to 6. So it's going to swell. And I've actually made the mistake of putting dry fitted chairs together at night and then say I'm too lazy to take them apart, put them back the next morning. You can't get them apart the next day, right? It happens that quick. So it's the moisture content. If you use the moisture content to your advantage, it works. So our this back. Right. So if we go back to our chair, these rungs are in a kiln, and they're brought down to close to no moisture content. Right, you could either put them in there and weigh them every day until they stop losing moisture, or you can just kind of do what I do and say, okay, well, 3 days, knowing what my kiln does, these things are bone dry. And even the static electricity on the lathe, I'll turn them that dry so that this is exactly the dimensions that I want. I'll turn them that way, and they're bone dry, and they're going into an air dried wet. Right, so they snap in really, really well. So those are the 3 primary ones. The other ones, probably every woodworker knows, is you want a tight joint. Right, so my joints, I'm actually measuring. I have a system on the lathe. I'm turning them dry, and I'm actually measuring them. I want them exactly at 5/8, plus or minus, plus or minus 3 to 5 mils, maybe. I mean, but I want them tight. Anything more than 5 mils, I think I'm going to have a loose joint, and I won't even use it. I'll toss it. Anything over 5, I'm probably not going to get into the mortise because it's just going to be too tight. So I want a really tight joint. Now, that said, is you can't burnish your joints either, right? If you burnish the wood, the glue won't stick to it. So, but those types of tight joints are really key to holding it together. If you have a sloppy joint, it's not going to work. And then lastly, I talk about a continuous glue bond. So a big part of my business is actually repairing old chairs, and I can't tell you how many chairs I've seen come in here that have no glue in the joints. Right? And why is that? Well, it's because they made a tight joint, right? And as you put the joint together, it's pushing all the glue on the sidewalls of the joint into the bottom of the joint, and it's scraping all the glue off the tenon. So if they're so tight, probability of you having glue on your joint is probably pretty slim. Now it makes a repair really easy because you don't have much glue to remove. But what I'll do on these ladder backs is I'll do what's called sizing. So I'll actually put a really thin coat of glue on the mortise on the tenon, and I'll wipe off almost all of it, and I'll let it dry, and I'll dry it in the kiln. So the tenons actually get dried in the kiln, so they stay at that really low moisture content. And as you reapply hide glue, it reactivates the stuff that's already there that's soaked into the wood. So even if I'm pushing everything out and pushing everything in, I'm still getting a glue bond. So those are really what I see as strong joint material. Really long, good straight grain. I want to watch my moisture content. I want to watch my grain orientation impeccably. And I want to make sure I have tight joints, and then I want to make sure I have a continuous glue bond. And that's to me, is I've since I started doing that now about 10 years, I have yet to have a chair joint fail. So it's I know it works, and it's took a little while to figure out, but it's been a good practice, and I say it's makes for some decent looking chairs. So, does anybody have any questions? I feels like I screamed through this material.
David, I had a question. Do you ever put any wedges in your tenons to tighten them? I don't see that here, but do you ever do that on any of your chairs?
Not on any of these ladder backs, I don't. On the Windsors, I do. I do them in the legs, and the reason is that it's a tapered joint in the seats of your Windsors. So I think the two common wedge angles are 6 degrees and 11 degrees. Either way, they go in and they get wedged, and it forces that out a little bit more. So I wedge all the legs, and anything that is a tapered joint, that's a through joint, will get wedged.
So on the ladder backs, is that a straight tenon?
This is actually a pin. This is actually a pin that's the same dimension as this. So I drive it through. It's almost like a drawbar pin.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So it's it comes up. I've got this arm has a tenon into this mortise. This is a housed tenon, so it's got 2 sizes. I don't know if we can see it, but it's got so this is a 1-inch hole, and it only goes in a 1/4 inch, and the rest of it is 5/8. And then I've got a pin that comes down about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. So it just makes assembly easier than if I had a straight wedge coming up. You could do it either way, but I just found that it's just easier to do this. And again, my pins are super dry. They're in the kiln. They have no moisture content to them. They get a good coating of glue. They're driven in with a hammer, and they are tight. And the housing inside of here, where the leg is housed within this front frame, keeps this leg from splitting.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It's kind of
Yeah.
holding
So
it in place.
it's holding it in place. Yeah, it's holding it in place. So actually, I have a
Doesn't have
sample
anywhere
of
to
it.
go.
It's upstairs, but I can grab it if you want to see what that joint looks like. But that's but I do all the. Yeah, so this Windsor has wedged. I don't know if you can see them. These are wedged.
Ooh, yeah, you have to get in close because that's a walnut on walnut wedge.
Yeah. Well, it's a maple on
Was it
pine. Maple
Oh,
on
okay.
pine.
Oh.
Yeah. So you can barely see the wedge in there, and they're not trimmed yet, so it's probably not helping you visually. But the arm posts as well, these are tapered joints, and this will get wedged from underneath.
Oh, okay.
So your ladder back tenons are also pegged?
I do, I peg these. They're really more ornamental than they are functional. I think because the joints down below for these two back rails are so tight, they're not moving, and we're not getting a lot of movement this way. If I really needed some added structural, I probably only needed one pin up here and up here, and that would be enough to hold it in place. But because I've got 3 in there and I have the room to make pairs and it looks pretty, they get extras. Yeah, so these are just dry fitted square wooden pegs. So it's a round hole. I square up the outside of the hole. I drive a wooden peg. It's again been in the kiln. It gets driven in there. I've never had one come out.
Do you dry bore them or just don't
Nope.
even bother?
No, don't even bother. It's all assembled. It's all assembled. One of the last things I do is put these in and carve them. And they're pretty. In fact, I have a sample thing here. You can see how. Yeah, these to show you how tight they are. These are some walnut pins and a piece of cherry, and the cherry's only that thin, and they're not coming out.
Oh, well.
Right, so they get driven in really well. The holes very top of the hole only gets squared, and the rest of the time you're jamming that square peg into a round hole. Right, it causes more expansion, and they're not coming apart. You know, the inside of these, this came off a Windsor chair, and you can see we still have a tight joint. These have been sawed apart for, I don't know, 5-6 years. A tiny bit of glue in the bottom, but otherwise that's it.
And you can even see, so I can get close enough here. You can see where there's like stress.
Yeah.
You can practically see it trying to expand.
Yeah, you can see it's another one here. I don't know if this one's any better or not. I say this is hard maple. It's hard. So, and it goes in. So I think this one actually I tried taking apart. I didn't like the way the whole chair went together. I tried taking it apart and it wouldn't, and I broke it.
Ooh.
So.
Hmm.
But that's those are your chair joints. Any other questions?
Tell us about the cane seating.
This is a, it's I want to say it's a 5mm cane. It's what's called the porch weave cane. I think your old porch rockers had a lot of this weave on it. So it's a pretty simplistic kind of weave, but it makes for a very comfortable seat. Yeah, you can see the top, dual strands, every other one coming through. So now we can see the bottom. So you can see where it starts up in here and just keeps going back and forth and back and forth. And these ends are filled in separately.
So where does it start and end?
The side ones start and end here. So it goes
Okay.
here, it goes back and forth,
Oh,
and ends
okay.
there. Or yeah, ends there. And then the back and forth weave really is, they just overlap. This section right here, the triangle, right? So if I come out square, this section of the triangle is just filled in. So this is loose, but you're weaving it when it's wet, and then when it dries, it's really stiff and it's not moving. So it's, there's a little bit of play in here, but that's it.
And
So I also do hickory bark weaving, and I do shaker tape, and then I do rush seats.
I saw a question, but it disappeared.
That caning, I assume, adds a lot of strength to the seat frame. I'm guessing.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I don't think you really need it, to hold the frame together, but it certainly dries and helps.
What kind of bits are used to bore the holes?
I'm using, so the question is what type of bits are used to bore the holes? I'm using brad points, pretty much exclusively a 5/8 inch brad point. All my joints are 5/8 inch. Almost all my Windsor chair legs, the undercarriage, the whole structure part is also 5/8. So I'm getting a 5/8 ream in through the seat, and then that's tapered, so it's bigger than that. But all the joints coming in, they're all 5/8.
Is that on the drill press?
All my ladder backs are done on a drill press. So I build jigs to be able to hold them at the appropriate angles. So you can see I've got an angle here. This is about a 5-degree angle. I've got angles in here that are compound. So each one of these go into the leg at a slightly different position, and it's all jigged up. So it's I do it on a drill press. It's very accurate. It's very, very quick. All my joinery on Windsor chairs are done by hand.
Bit and brace.
Yeah, bit and brace, power drill.
Modern bit and brace.
Modern bit and brace. Yeah. I of course, when you start, you gotta be the official. So I started with spoon bits, right?
Ooh.
So, and they're easy to use. They're really, really nice to use. It's nice and quiet, and they produce nice little curly Q shapings and things. And then I was like, okay, well, I got to get quicker. Then it's with an auger bit, and then it's with power drill bits.
So is all of that drilling done, that angle drilling done on square stock, and then you shape the components?
No, it's all the drilling's done on finished round stock. So with the exception of the slats for the mortises, those mortises get done on flat stock, and then they're shaped round, and then the rest of the drilling goes. So when a leg comes out of, so this is a similar shaped leg. When it comes out of the drying form, And when it comes out of the drying form, it looks like this, it's square. And I will then go in, and because I have a nice flat reference surface, I can hold this on a flat, the bottom on a flat reference surface, I can hold this on a reference surface. These mortises are much easier to do. And you can chop them, or you can do them with a router, or I've done them on a, hollow chisel mortiser. So, but they're 1/4-inch slats, so they're small, so they're not very long, so they go pretty quick. And then once those are done and the slats are fitted, this will get shaped, and it gets turned. It gets turned round by hand.
So for the tapered holes,
Yeah.
you do a drill through or
Drill through and then a
again,
reamer.
How do you round them over?
Round which part over?
The legs. You was square, now you round it to use a spoke shave?
I start with a draw knife. I turn it into an octagon, and I can get most of the wood off of the octagon with a draw knife. And then I'll finish it up with a spoke shave. And then the rest of it is all spoke shave work.
Yeah, the center of his shop is pretty much the shave horse here.
Yeah. Yeah, so center of my shop is my bandsaw, my shave horse, and my lathe, and they're all within a couple steps of each other.
Dave, how long would it take you to turn one of the square legs into a round shape?
Really not more than an hour, hour and a half.
Wow.
It goes, you get into if you follow the step-by-step motion, it goes really, really quickly. It's really not that difficult. In class, it's like an all-day affair to get 2 legs round. But if you do them, then it's really not that bad. It's learning how to draw octagons on square stock. So you have good reference lines, right? You take out the wood down to your reference line, and then you now have an 8, then you take it to 16, then you take it to 32, and then you just, take a scraper and smooth it out.
How much sanding do you end up doing? With
Almost
actual
none.
sandpaper?
Almost none.
Almost none. Wow.
Yeah. So the rungs are all turned on the lathe, and I'll touch them up with some 220 after I hit them with the skew, and that's it. The rear legs, by the time they're on a scraper, and it also depends on the type of seat I'm putting on. So I do a lot of hickory bark seats, and I should have brought a chair out that has one of those because they're really beautiful seats. They're a lot of work. I've yet to do a chair seat in under about 2.5 hours.
Oh, wow.
And that's and you have at least an hour and a half of prep work, and then you've got another hour to an hour and a half of finish work afterwards. But because you're weaving it wet, you're constantly spraying the chair with water, so the whole chair just fuzzes up, and you got to sand it afterwards. So once and even with this is you put this on pretty wet. So you're going to, if I know I'm going to do it, a lot of times I'll pre-finish it. So if the water won't be as bad, but you always end up having the water always, fuzzes it up a little bit.
What takes so long with the hickory seats? Is it just?
It's just a lot of cutting and figuring, and you want to keep them entertained. I can go get one. Nice ones out. It's nice ones out in the house, but they're. I think it's one of the most comfortable of the woven seats that there are. They last forever. They claim to last that they're a good 70-75 year seat, versus a cane, which is 5 to 10, and a rush seat, which is about the same. And your shaker tape seats, depending on their use, can go a little bit more, but they're still, they still wear out pretty quick.
what are you calling that seat? Hickory? What-
This is a cane.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is a cane seat. Yeah, I should have,
no. What's the name of the other one?
hickory bark or a shaker tape. So
Oh,
bring this
hickory,
chair up.
hickory bark. Okay.
So this is what you would think of as a cloth seat covered in dog hair, right, for my dog. But, you know, a black and a natural cotton seat. There's a foam insert that's in here. Again, all the same principles. These legs are bent, so they look a little wonky if you're looking at it, but it's straight grained hard maple, straight grained hard maple. We got some spalted maple for the slats, straight grained. And all these joints, your tangential grain is this way, so they're coming in sideways. And the same here, you can see that your rungs are coming in at that 45-degree angle to your growth rings.
Which seat do most people like, the cane or the cotton?
I've sold more chairs in hickory bark than anything. But I'm going to say probably a more popular chair from a price point is the shaker tape. Yeah. You know, it's quick, it's easy. You can do a chair in an hour. You know, it's not a big deal. You know, even these cane seats take us several hours to get done, but they're not as onerous as a hickory bark because you don't have any of the prep work or the finish work afterwards. You know, if you picture a hickory bark seat, you got to sand each individual piece and get oil on it. You know, once it dries, and you put it on wet, and 5 days later it's dry. So even though the seat's on there, you can't do much with it. Yeah, this is well, this is what your hickory bark looks like. And this is you can tell it's very, very stiff. So it's got to be wetted for several hours before you can use it.
Right.
And then it's got to be shaved down. So this has all been shaved down with a spoke shave to give it a real smooth finish. And then you can weave it. Yep. So
Since you're weaving the hickory bark wet, does it tighten up as it dries out?
Yeah, it tightens up a little bit. Again, it really doesn't tighten up much this way. It tightens up a lot this way. So there's a ton of shrinkage in it. So you're not getting this really tight weave you have with the tape. You're not getting that with hickory bark.
Right.
It's just not happening.
But it doesn't tighten the seat because it's not.
No, because you're not really shrinking it. But what it does is, because it goes in and out and in and out, as it dries, it will tighten up the ends because of the ins and outs.
Right.
Yeah.
So the slats in back, they, I presume, are steam bent?
Yes. Yeah, so I have some slats I steam bent yesterday. So if we can move the posters. So the ones on the right, these were steam bent yesterday. All of these are cherry. They've been bent. I have, when I'm doing more production work, I have a rocking chair that I do in production. Everything is pre-cut and pre-measured, and everyone's exactly the same. I can build a rack to hold them bent like this. When I'm doing some one-offs on some of these others, these are, so these got bent up yesterday. I'll actually measure the slat for each individual chair. And so they're bent at a similar angle. I say these are, again, you can see it's quarter sawn cherry.
Oh yeah.
Right. And it's beautifully grained. They're all sequential. So when I cut them out of a form, I mark them so that they will come out in sequence. So as I'm building a chair, you know, each board will be next to each other as they come out of the log.
Next to his brother.
Yeah.
So those are pre-made drying frames.
Yes. Yeah, so I know about how long they should be, and I know the arc that I want to have there. So they're pre-bent, or they're pre-bent form. So I have a form that I bend them over. That's just a radius, half circle. I bend them in there, and then they go into those drying forms, and they'll stay in that drying form. A slat like this, it's only a 1/4 inch thick. It's dry overnight. I can start using them the next day. Even though they were fully steamed and really, really wet, they dry. At least, especially in the winter when you have some heat on, they dry almost instantaneously.
So for the ones on the right, do you cut those to shape first and
I cut
then?
them to shape first and then bend them. Yeah. So they'll go into a frame. Just held together by string. Find the other one, we can put it in here.
So you're using that as a drying form as well.
No, this is a prototype that I made that I was testing out different dimensions. So this is thicker than this one is, and I was playing with the curves, and I wanted to see how it was going to look for a rocking chair. And so I keep it around as I further develop this rocking chair. But I actually ended up selling a number of them. But once I know that each one of these has the exact dimension back and forth, I can make a template and I can pre-cut them and pre-dry them like that. And it saves a ton of time.
I bet.
So again, but it's all the same construction. Perfectly straight grain, water sawn grain going into a mortise.
Dave, where do you source your wood?
I have a couple of local sawyers that'll cut for me, and I have a good sized mill that's here where I can buy logs. So for my Windsors, I'm buying logs and I'm riving them to get perfectly straight grain. For my ladder backs, I'm actually having them milled. So I'm buying in 9/4 slabs, and I'm buying for perfectly straight trunks. I want no knots. I want perfectly straight. And the guys know that I want to cut perfectly down the center. So most logs are not perfect cylinders, right? So if you just lay it on the frame and start cutting, you get good cathedrals and it looks pretty, but it does me no good. So I have them actually raise up the frame to make sure the center of the tree is perfectly level with the blade, and then they can start slicing. And that'll give me enough perfectly straight grain to be able to cut for ladder backs. And it saves an awful lot of sledgehammer work with a versus riving a log.
How did you convince them to do all that work?
It's really, it's like a minor adjustment on the first cut.
Huh.
You know, and it's really not. I said there's a couple of local sawyers that'll do it. There's plenty of guys that have local mills that'll cut for you. You know, that if you tell them you want it. But I said I like the 9/4 because I can get 5 slats out of a 9/4. I can get 5/4 inch slats out of a 9/4 inch piece to bend it. So I'm getting perfectly from one down to the other. And then when I bend, I'm bending 1 5/8 by 1 7/8. And that allows me the option of rotating it one way or the other way into the stock. And if I have only 1 inch thick rungs, I can get 2 rungs out of an 1 1/4 board. or 2 1/4 inch board, right? With very little waste. So 2.5 inches is fine. There's a great mill down in New Haven called City Bench, and they have all their slabs online. So you can just go down there and say, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z slab that I saw, and they have everything's numbered, everything's dated, and where it came from and when it was milled. So you can know about what the moisture content's going to be depending on when they milled it. And they keep a beautiful yard down just outside New Haven, Connecticut, and they're great people to deal with. And I've bought awful lot of lumber from those guys over the years. I said my last load came from a guy called Tree Cycle Sawmill. He's up in Bethlehem, Connecticut. My only issue with that is that I get it, it's green. I mean, it's a 30-40% moisture content, and it's got to be stickered for a while before I can really use it, but it's dirt cheap. And he cuts it the way I want to cut it, you know. And Hinman and Sons is a pretty big yard lumber mill here in Burlington, Connecticut, and I can go buy whole logs from them. So they're not going to do any special cutting for me. They're too big, but they'll, I still buy some green air dried lumber from them off and on because they're generally dealing in really straight logs. But I'll be able to go and say I need a grade A white oak log, and they say go pick one out, and they'll load it on my trailer, and I can haul it away, which is nice. And those are probably my 3 primary sources of lumber here.
Are all these mills getting, is it all locally grown trees? Like
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, City Bench harvests them mostly. It's a ton of city trees. So they're harvesting around Yale and all those university campuses, around New Haven, that whole kind of lower Connecticut River Valley. They're harvesting their trees from there. Tree Cycle's harvesting them more from Litchfield County up in the Northwest. Hinman and Sons, I think they get them. It's such a big yard, you know. You go there and there's probably 300 or 400 logs on site at any one time. I mean, it's a big operation. So they do sell kiln dried. They sell a lot of kiln dried, and they have milling services and stuff like that. But they're getting stuff from all over. But I'm assuming that it's all local. It's I said I buy ash, white oak, brown oak. They have chestnut oak, which is a type of brown oak, which is really beautiful. And that's usually all I'm buying from them. You know, the City Bench and Tree Cycle, I'm buying cherry, walnut, and ash from them for the most part. I'm not getting any oak from them.
You would think there'd be like a finite supply of trees in a state like Connecticut. Like at what point does it just dry up? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, Northwest Connecticut is almost all wooded.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, it's Northwest Connecticut's beautiful, you know, for that. And there's a ton of trees.
Yeah, Mark Stimson said that he does a lot of,
Yeah.
he comes down to Connecticut a lot because it's all trees.
Yeah. Yeah. I bought wood from Mark in the past. I haven't in probably 4 or 5 years, but he had a really nice boule of red oak that I bought from him.
I'm a pilot, and early on I discovered that we're used to driving around through streets, and we have no idea how much woods are to either side of those streets. And then you get on an airplane, you fly over it, and you realize a place like Rhode Island is almost all trees.
Yeah.
Almost all trees, not that many roads.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why you get fooled into thinking there's a limited supply.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just a ton. And the last 3 big oak logs I picked up because they were being cut by CLMP to make roads. And I've got, 7-8 foot, 22 to 24 inch diameter oak logs without a knot in them. Just straight as can be, and they were cut by CLMP and left there.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing is,
make it light and power.
The other thing is to try and clear a field for horses or whatever, and you realize, oh my God,
Yeah,
it costs $10,000 to get the trees out of there.
yeah.
So it's a lot of effort.
Mhm.
Dave, how about your what's your ratio of Windsor chairs versus these like ladder back chairs that you've been showing us tonight? As
On
far
any
as
given year, it kind of changes. So last year I did a lot of Windsor chairs and I did a lot of settees, 2 and 3 person settees. And I did very little ladder backs. And right now I'm building almost all ladder backs. This year's been almost 100% ladder backs. So out of the last 20 chairs, so I'm at a point where I've got at least 20 chairs on order right now, is 18 of them are ladder backs and 2 of them are Windsors. And last year it was complete opposite.
no rhyme or reason to it.
No. If I can figure it out, I'll let you know. I'm able to figure it out. I think, I got these great new ladder back designs, and they sit there and nothing happens to them. And then all of a sudden I'm selling like 5, 6, 8 of them.
It's because you're putting out new designs.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, these are all one at a time. So if you've got an order for 23, what's the time frame? Start.
I'm currently running 12 to 16 weeks out from order.
Wow.
And your average chair is about 20 hours from log selection to putting your final coat of finish on it.
Wow.
20
So
hours.
some of them are a lot more, obviously, some of your bigger chairs and settees and stuff are a lot more, but your average chair is about 20 hours.
So 2 chairs a week?
Yeah.
2 to 3 chairs a week?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah, I said they're designs I do all the time. I'm on the lathe all the time. So these finished rungs are literally 3 minutes.
Do you have like any tracing attachments? Or is it all freehand on the
It's
lathe?
all freehand.
Wow.
I have patterns for all the legs and, tell me the thicknesses at each point, start point and things, but everything's done freehand.
Wow.
And I think once you get a feel for it, it's quicker to do
Once
it.
you get a feel, it's quicker to do it. Yeah. So Windsor leg, I can do a finished Windsor leg, in under 10 minutes. And I know Greg Pennington does them in about 4. I don't know how he does it that quick, but
Wow.
but I can do a full baluster Windsor leg in under 10 minutes. So this would be a full baluster leg.
You do that in under 10 minutes?
Yeah.
From scratch?
Yeah. From square.
Wow.
Yeah. That's the time on the lathe, not the time of cutting it or anything.
Right.
But again, it's a hard maple and I have perfectly straight grain going up it, which is what gives it strength. So, but I've probably made, hundreds, 600, 800, maybe 1,000 of this particular pattern over the years, so it's 2 tools, 3 tools, 3 tools. That's it.
Have you ever been tempted to approach a CNC house and like mass produce that like right there?
Yeah, the trouble, I haven't seen them on the CNCs, the old duplicators. And the reason I learned to turn was because I couldn't get the crisp detail that I wanted. Right. And, and then they weren't picking out the wood. So the wood I was getting wasn't great to begin with. Right. So the wood wasn't great. I'm not getting crisp details. I'm getting my bird speaks or chipped. I'm getting chips. They're coming in with chips in them and things. Yeah. So the first 4 or 5 years I was building and selling Windsors, I was ordering them and the quality was just horrible. And that's when I decided I needed to learn how to turn.
I see.
And I filled several winters of worst of wood stoves with not good ones.
And now you have skill.
Yeah. I said, and I make several kinds of, the Windsor legs from the Philadelphia style arrow points to the Rhode Island baluster legs, which are a little bit different, to the, Curtis Buchanan's very New York stylish balusters, to the Connecticut style balusters. So depending on the chair coming in, I generally do a fairly standard, fairly simple Connecticut style baluster leg for most of my chairs, because I'm from Connecticut, but it's a decent leg without being too delicate and without being too heavy.
And the
How
ladder
do-
backs are all.
So these
Those
are,
aren't
yeah,
turned,
yeah.
those
So for the ladder backs, the front legs on these are turned.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, they're turned just because for speed.
Yeah.
I can do them by hand, but they're speed. But the rear legs are shaped by hand. So they're let's say they're shaped by hand.
How do the Rhode Island legs differ from the Connecticut legs?
Yeah, Rhode Island had a very distinctive Windsor chair design. This is a Rhode Island. This is a Rhode Island leg. This is a Connecticut leg. So they had this very bulbous part down here that came down very convex, coming into a very narrow foot versus a straight leg. They had a very bulbous ball here. And then the rest of it was very similar, although the bird's beak up here tended to be larger than the other ones. So some pretty large bird beaks, really bulbous in here and bulbous here. And this is you see a chair with this kind of bulbous down here, and guaranteed it was made in Rhode Island. I think a lot of the early Windsor chair makers, they relied on some local turners to turn all their legs for them.
Yeah.
The big guy down it was a Lisbon, Connecticut, around the Connecticut, Rhode Island border, E.B. Tracy. You can pretty much tell his legs, they're all the same. They're a little bit fatter in here, but not much, but it's very similar to this leg. But as soon as you get in, this is a very common leg in Rhode Island. I don't think I have any Philadelphia legs handy.
I wonder what led to that design for the Rhode Island legs.
Probably, they were all local guys filling in local markets. And it's like I said, it's far easier to turn 100 of these than to turn of everything the same than it is to keep changing it all the time. And, he was supplying local markets. And it's not a bad looking leg. I've made some beautiful chairs with these legs.
And a lot of stuff was outsourced. Like the Townsends didn't
Yeah.
do any of the carving that they're so well known for.
Yeah.
They had a guy.
Yeah. Steve Lauder gave a great presentation at the Yale Furniture Study on all the inlays. All the inlays were outsourced too.
Right.
They used to buy them from Europe. All the inlays were bought, and then they would do the inlays themselves. They had huge inventories of inlays.
So when you're buying bandings, don't feel bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else do we have? Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Am I missing
Any
anything?
type thing?
Very nice. Very informative.
Thank you.
You have classes?
I do. They're on my website. It's daviddouillard chairmaker.com. And I still have a few openings left throughout the later in the year. So it's the intro to ladder back chair making is a chair similar to this, but it has a hickory bark seat. It doesn't have this as the post that comes up all the way through, or with that as an armchair. And then I do have a sack back class and a continuous arm Windsor class that's scheduled for this year.
What's
One of
what's the
them's gonna
duration of the
be-
class?
Pardon?
What is the duration of the class?
They're
Like,
generally
how's it-
week-long classes. So 5 to 7 days, depending on the chair. My goal is that you walk away with a finished chair, and hopefully most of your questions are answered. So I've done them in as little as 4 days, and it's so rushed, I don't think that people learn anything. And the other thing I do is the classes here are limited to 3 people, because I want to be able to make sure that everybody gets, full hands-on experience of being able to build it. Because, going from doing casework where everything is square and everything is referenced off a flat surface, and you're going to a chair where there are no 90-degree angles and everything's based off round surfaces versus flat surfaces, that understanding one, even to get to a round surface that you're going to do and then reference off, it just takes time for the head to get around. And it's all hand tools. So we're teaching draw knife skills, we're teaching spoke save skills, as well as the whole theory and putting a chair together. So we do all the steam bending, we do everything.
Some of your classes are at Bob Van Dyke's.
Yeah,
Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking.
I've got a stool class with Bob in May. So it's a perch stool based on Pete Galbert's design, 3-legged stool. And then I've got a sack back class. I think it's the week of July 12th at Bob's. But we did one last August. It was really it went quite well.
Do any classes right there at your shop, or is it
Most
over?
all of them are here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I teach down at Greg Pennington's school down in Hendersonville, Tennessee as well. So I have a class there in June. But and I do a class at Bob's, but all the other classes are right here in New Hartford.
Did you buy a kiln or did you make your own?
I made one.
You made one.
So I don't know if we can see, the light's not great.
Well, we can give it a shot.
Give it a shot. So because I do a ton of work, this kiln is 2 by 4 by 4. So it's a plywood frame with inch thick solid core foam backing. I have slots on top to hold legs and arms. It is powered by a heat lamp. So these are all the rungs for 6 chairs, and they'll all get turned down tomorrow. And these rungs have been in here for a week. So I know that and I run it at, 120 degrees, 130 degrees on average. So it's on a thermostat, so I don't have to worry about it.
Does the steam escape somehow, or is it just kind of,
No,
just gets out of the
it's
wood
not
and-
meant to.
there's not a lot of steam coming out?
There's not steam coming out. So one is there's holes all over the top of this, and there's usually a hole or 2 that are open. And this is not an airtight construction by any means.
Right.
So the goal is to get some air from the bottom coming up and going right up through the top. And over time, you're getting a slow heat exchange. You don't need a huge rapid exchange, because that's when you're
Right.
getting case hardening and where you get a lot of the checking and stuff like that. You actually want it to go fairly slow. So you don't get any of that checking.
Do you ever have a problem when you're just drawing out the tenons?
Not generally, no. No, I've never had a check in a tenon. Just drawing just a tenon. But again, I'm starting with very straight grained wood. So, and the tenons are small, the base of the tenon on your taper tenons is at 7/8 of an inch, and the tip of it's at 5/8 of an inch. So it's 2 inches long. It's not a huge piece of wood where you're going to get some severe checking anyways. And again, I'm starting them at that, 12 at the lowest, but really 14 to 18% moisture content is where they're starting. So they're not starting way over 20 and going down really quick down to 0. In fact, I don't do that. things are over 20%, I sticker them and I layer them in the shop before I touch them. And then they'll stay in the shop for a little bit till I know that they're under that 20-degree moisture content, and then they can go in the kiln. But anything over 20 degrees will never go inside the kiln. It's just too much risk of it checking and not drying properly.
Can't go too fast.
Did I miss any other questions? I think that's all we have in the chat.
I think we've drained him of as much information as we can.
Well, it's all good questions. I thank you very much. It was a nice chat.
We enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Yeah, feel free to send out any other questions via email or Instagram or anything, any of the other platforms you guys use.
What are your
Very good,
things?
Dave.
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm Douyard chairmaker. And then it's David at daviddouyardchairmaker.com for email. But if you look at there's a contact sheet on my website.
Awesome.
Pretty awesome, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice.
Brian,
I mean-
what was your poll? Do you have the poll results?
It looks like nobody voted.
I
voted.
I voted.
I voted.
Okay.
I voted.
What poll? Was there a poll in the newsletter that I just didn't read?
Oh, no, there should have been a poll that came up.
It came up. Yep. It was a yes, no question.
In the Zoom meeting?
Yes.
My Zoom must be defective.
Yeah, no, I got
Oh, we've got to stop the steal.
it.
I'd like to mention real quick about, even though I highly doubt that I will ever get into making chairs, but I appreciate getting the kinds of information that you gave out, because of things like about the joints and the tenons fitting into the legs, and learning a lot more about the wood movement, about how to pay attention to that for things either loosening up or tightening up, and how to put that into play in the other types of things that I do. So thank you for all that in-depth info.
Yeah, I think it's very applicable. If you look at a lot of the old tables and things, all the legs are riffs on, and the two aprons are coming in at that 45-degree angle. It was very, very, very prevalent to build that way.
I think a lot of us are really intimidated by chair making. And the more I read about it, I can see how it might be possible. So it's nice to see what you show us here. It's not impossible.
No. Everybody who comes here walks away with a chair they can use.
Excellent.
That's why I haven't taken a class with you yet.
Yeah.
I keep signing up, but you never seem to accept it. They always seem to be full.
Was your first chair a ladder back or a Windsor?
No, my first chair that I made was in the early 90s. It was actually a arts and crafts style chair.
Okay.
Yeah. It was Brazilian rosewood veneer over hard maple.
Mm.
With the leather seat. So at the time I was doing a ton of veneer work. So it went with a Brazilian rosewood stereo cabinet.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So are you in a basement shop or is it a building?
No, I have
separate
a
building?
barn. It's a essentially, well, the shop space itself is about 800 feet, and it's an 1870s barn on the property. Yeah.
I don't know what a good angle is here.
Yeah, we don't have a good angle, right? This is the we're in the major workspace, which is only about 600, 700 square feet. So we've got a drill press, one bench, lathe tools, chop saw station. We got another bench, dust collection, bandsaw. Got storage. We've got chair legs that are drying that have been steam bent. And they've got a small joiner and planer in the kiln. And this is the main shop where everything happens.
You have lumber storage upstairs?
Yeah, so I literally have 2,000 square feet. So
Oh, wow.
the building is 20 by 50. And I've got 200 feet of office. Then I've got this small section with a table saw in it. And I've got this, and then it's all open upstairs.
Oh, wow.
The only trouble with upstairs is, it was built in 1870 when people were short. The beams are come to here,
Right.
and there's 3 of them. And I've hit them all. So, but it's lumber storage, jigs, boxes. I have extra shave horses. When I have classes, I've got 3 shave horses in here for them. They're upstairs. Things, all my hickory bark is upstairs. I've got several thousand feet of hickory bark upstairs. So it's storage.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is the only spot that's heated and insulated. Except for the office. The office is, my wife made me do that for her. Yeah.
So Dave, most of the Windsors get painted?
Yes. And it's very, very traditional. It's because you're building, you're using the types of wood for its strength within the chair. So the legs are always a hardwood, hard maple, birch, rarely anything else. Your seats are something soft, eastern white pine, butternut, eastern white pine. And then all your bendings and all your spindles are oak for the most part. Sometimes they're ash or hickory. And what it does is you can get them really thin and they're really flexible. So, my spindles go down to 5/16 of an inch, right? And you can literally bend them and they're not going to break. And, and then all the bendings, the continuous arm bendings and things, oak just bends beautifully. I prefer white. Northern red comes in a close second, which has a real tight grain structure like a white oak does. Brown oak tends to check too much when it dries. It dries really funny for some reason. And regular red oak just looks fine too, And then it's painted to unify the design.
And the finish you typically put on the ladder backs is, what is that?
I'm generally using a oil varnish mix. Sometimes they're shellac. It depends. If I have ash or maple, I'm using a super blonde shellac because I want to keep that really white look to it. If it's walnut, it's getting a varnish oil on it because it'll darken it up and make it same with cherry. I'll generally use that. I've used Osmo in the past. It's a heavy solids, heavy wax solids oil. It works really, really well. I just don't like the dry time. It takes a long time for it to dry. So this maple ladder back is shellac. This ash chair, I believe, is oil. I've painted them black. I did a whole series of ladder backs in red oak and painted them black so that the grain shows through really nicely. And it's a really, really nice look.
What do you use for paint?
Milk paint.
Milk paint?
Yeah, because it's so thin, it's not going to fill in the pores or anything, but it'll give you that nice sheen and then a quick coat or two of oil on top to give it a good luster. Yeah. So I've built 2 full dining room sets of oak with black paint and hickory bark seats, and it's a really, really nice look. Yeah.
Cool. Do you spray your finishes or is it all brushed?
No, I do them hand. I have a sprayer. I don't have a spray booth. One of the reasons for getting into a smaller shop was to get away from all the dust and all the power equipment and the spraying and the stuff. So I could probably get things done quicker, but I like the hand rub finish, and it's kind of what I do. So people are buying it for a hand rub finish as well.
Mhm.
What varnish do you use now?
So I'm using, asking what varnish I use. I use, I mix my own, and I'm mixing generally the Epiphane varnishes, which are for boats. Right. So one is they usually have some UV inhibitors, and they're a more flexible varnish. And then I'm adding linseed oil and tung oil to them, generally in about a third mix. I think it's an old Sam Malouf formula. I think is where it came from. I learned it from somebody, 30 years ago, but I think it came from Sam Malouf, and I've been happy with it. It's sand it on, wipe it off, put it on, wipe it off, put it on, wipe it off. I treat it as a wipe on varnish.
Some kind of question. May have just been thanks. Ah, somebody done that with varnish, but can't get the varnish anymore.
Yeah.
So
I actually buy my varnish in Narragansett. To be honest with you, that's where I buy it. There's a good boat place down there in the shopping center. And it's I buy my varnish there. We have friends in Narragansett, so whenever I go down, I stock up.
Well, Jamestown Distributors is where everybody tends to get it from online.
Okay.
And I used to live right down the street from Jamestown Distributors.
I understand Total Boat's got a pretty nice varnish, but they don't want to ship it. I think there's shipping restrictions on shipping theirs for some reason. There's the VOCs or something in it. I'm not sure.
Interesting.
But I understand that it's a nice varnish. But I say I'm diluting it with, my feeling is that the tung oil helps get it into the wood more, and the linseed oil helps get it into the wood and really saturate it a lot better than a straight varnish, which will sit on the surface. And the tung oil helps get it in, but still provides an added layer. And I think the tung oil adds a nice luster to a normal varnish. So it'll tone down a glossy varnish and make it a little bit of a kind of a semi-gloss high luster thing.
You'll have to get it delivered to your friend in Narragansett.
Yeah.
You should try Defender Industries in Connecticut. Is right there off of 95. They have
okay.
it. We have found that this will sound heretical. Ace spar varnish we use that all for our boat work.
Okay.
And it ranks. There's a magazine that's sort of the Consumer Reports of sailboating is Practical Sailor. And every year they test, they have a huge varnish testing facility in Connecticut. And Ace Hardware spar varnish comes up at the top almost every year. And we were very, very skeptical about this because we use Epiphanes and all these, and very expensive varnish, Ace spar varnish is $8 a quart. And
I like Ace spar varnish.
And we also we fool around with it too. But just straight out of the can, it's phenomenal, and it lasts. 3 coats on wood on a boat will last you 5 years without a recoat. It's remarkable. We don't know how they do it, but it's for what it's worth.
Yeah.
When you say Ace, do you mean Ace Hardware?
Yes.
Really?
It's the trouble is it's hard to find. If you live near the water and there's an Ace Hardware near there, like Narragansett or Westport where we are, they'll stock it. But the typical Ace Hardware store will not typically carry it. But I guess it could be ordered. But it's just plain old Ace Hardware spar varnish. It comes in gloss and semi-gloss.
Wow.
It works for outdoor work. It's just unbelievably phenomenal.
So
Who knew?
what I've read is most of the quote unquote spar varnish you can buy at Home Depot and all that stuff just does not have the UV inhibitors.
No.
No.
Well, the helmsman, like, Minwax, Helmsman, and those, no, that's all junk. It's crap.
It's a
Yeah.
joke, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's,
Yeah, Sherwin-Williams used to make a good varnish, but they discontinued it a long time ago. And they had their brand of varnish was pretty good, but it's been discontinued for a long, long time.
yeah, the major, I mean, Pettit and Interlux and so forth are all the big boat building brands.
Yeah.
And Pettit is usually in the top. The Pettit varnish is in the top, but again, again, like I said, it sounds like heresy, but we use a lot of it in our work, and it's it saves a lot of money and a lot of time because you only have to refinish about every 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. I'll be looking for some.
You might play with it and see, and then you can yell at me when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like boat ownership to me at all.
I hate bright work. If I can do it, I paint. I paint it to look like varnish.
Yeah.
That's why God invented colored finishes.
What kind of a mixture ratio do you use for the tung oil and varnish?
It's a third.
Yeah, we use actually that's exactly what we use for interior boat building. That exact same blend. There must have been somebody. I think you mentioned a name that came up with that formula. And
I don't know if it came out of the Danish furniture realm or Danish boat building, but that seems to be where I got it. And I had an old woodworker friend who told me about it, and I started using it. And I've been using it now for 35, 40 years.
Yeah, it's a wipe. You use it as a wipe on. It's not. It's a wipe on. It's applied. We apply it as a wipe on. I think you mentioned that as well.
Yeah, I apply it as a wipe on.
Right.
Yeah.
And it just finishes beautifully. Again, for all interior bright work, that's in boats. That's what we use.
What's the third?
Linseed oil.
Oh,
linseed
okay.
oil. Real linseed oil.
Yeah.
Tung oil and varnish.
Varnish. Yeah.
What kind of tung oil?
Just pure tung oil. I've been getting it out of the Real Milk Paint Company.
So like not the Minwax.
No.
Tung oil.
No.
I assumed that the other third was the salt. There's no solvent in that formula?
No, there isn't. There's times when I've added citrus oil to it if I think it's too thick, and you can get citrus oil, or the Real Milk Paint Company makes a product they call half and half, which is half tung oil and half citrus oil. And I'll sometimes use that as the 1/3, and that'll thin it quite a bit. And then it's the citrus oil is all natural, but it behaves beautifully with oil-based stuff.
And it adds a nice scent.
It has a very, very nice scent. Yeah, and I'll use their half and half stuff on, bowls and cutting boards and stuff like that, because their stuff is all natural, and it's a nice easy finish to use. But it doesn't build really well. It'll soak in really nice and give you a really nice finish, but it's not going to build like a varnish will.
Cool.
I guess I'm partial to the scent of mineral spirits myself, but that's just me.
Turpentine. Go back to turpentine. It's a lot more toxic. It's wonderful.
It's tough to find real turpentine these days.
Yeah.
Well, the boat industry still supplies it by the gallon. You can get it.
Yeah. Okay, I gotta find that.
And lead paint is also still very popular in boat building.
Really?
Yeah, Kirby's in New Bedford will make you a batch.
I know a guy.
I know a guy. No, Kirby is one of the oldest paint factories on the United States. Still in business in New Bedford. They specialize in boat paint, but they still produce. They're licensed to produce lead paint. And the license allows them to do it for, if you apply it to metal. But we say, well, there's a lot of metal holding a boat together, so,
Yeah.
My chairs are metal. My chairs are metal.
What's the benefit of the lead, actually?
Oh, we actually don't use the lead for the base paint. We use red lead as a preservative between the planks and the ribs. And it looks orange. I mean, if you look on YouTube and look at boat building, you'll see people slathering this orange paint all under the planks and on the ribs. It's sort of a preservative, but it's almost pure lead, but it really works. I mean, there's a reason why lead paint was invented. But it's not really once you put the boat together, it's all hidden. I mean, it's never touched by mortal man again until the boat comes in.
It's encapsulated.
It's between the ribs and the planks, and it acts as a barrier to resist rot. And but Kirby's will make that too for me. Yeah. And boat soup, which is another something you guys probably have not used often. It's pine tar, linseed oil, turpentine. It's just called boat soup, and that's the if you ever go to it like an old like Mystic Seaport, there's a particular smell of pine tar. Smells like burnt wood, and that was the original preservative for 1,000 years. Kirby's will make that for you too. But you should look into Kirby's paint in New Bedford. An interesting place.
Cool. Well, I think we're going to call it, and have a good night, guys.
Thank you very
David,
much.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.